Hi, my name is Lemmy.
Hi, I'm Ethan Fleming.
Hi, I'm Robert Higgins, and we're going to be going over settlers, colonialism, and the impact of the Spanish Empire on the Americas.
How did Europe conquer and acquire much of the land in the Americas? They did this in a variety of ways. They did this through war. They killed off a large number of people in the Caribbeans, in the what is now Mexico with the Aztecs, Central America with the Mayans, and South America with the Incas, and a large number of the Amazonian tribes in the area as well. They pretty much ran a genocidal war with many of these native people. And that brought also a religious component into it as well. You have people that were Christians and Catholics that viewed much of the natives as demons, as lesser, as people that needed to be subjugated and brought into the light, pretty much. They didn't think these people were an equal, even though they seen a lot of their accomplishments, the empires, the temples, the cities that they had built, the weapons that they did have, even if they were primitive. You could see that there was sophistication with many of these people. You also have payments between European and the natives. So you have in the Americas, in North America, you had settlers that would pay for the land, and also throughout Central and South America as well, they would give some sort of payments to the natives. But many of these people didn't understand the concept of money or ownership. Many of these people didn't own land. They didn't think you had a right over dirt, water, or air. And so this was a concept that many of the Native Americans didn't understand or got until it was too late. They would take the payments and then they would be pushed off the land, not knowing what was going on. You also have the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494, in which Spain and Portugal pretty much carved out much of the New World. Spain would get the Western Hemisphere, the Western and Northern Hemisphere of the Americas, and Portugal would get the Southern Eastern area of the Americas, Brazil, pretty much. And the Spanish would get pretty much everything as far as parts of the United States, the Caribbean, South and Central America. Who installed this was Pope Alexander the Fourth, and he himself was Spanish, and so that's the reason why much of the New World was handed over to Spain at that moment in time. You also have the Spanish crown that offered money to many of the conquistadors or just settlers that were coming into the area. If you fought for the crown, if you killed the indigenous people or you converted them over and you grabbed land or found gold, the Spanish would reward you with slivers of land in the New World. And that's pretty much how everyday people ended up acquiring land in the Americas. And unfortunately, that came at the cost of the native people.
Thank you, Robert, for talking about land acquisition. And now we'll be talking about cultural assimilation. And specifically, we're going to be talking about Native American cultural assimilation to Spain. So, first things first, before we talk about cultural simulation, we got to talk about what was Spanish contact like with the Native Americans. So, in 1492, the first Spanish explorers with Christopher Columbus were the first ones to touch down and to explore the Latin American countries or the nations. And during that time, this is the first time Christopher Columbus came in and was exploring the land. And around 1598 was a man named Juan de Anote. He was the first Spanish governor of New Mexico, and he came in with the settlers and traveled all the way to Rio Grande as a northern extension of the El Camino Real, and that is going to be short for the Royal Road of the Interior Land. And so he came in, he colonized the Santa Fe area, and this was actually known to be called as the land without water. And as the years went by, this is when the raids started to get bad, and these raids actually were costly and failed to the settlers and bred tense and often many really tense relationships between the Apaches and the settlers. So, what is cultural assimilation? Well, cultural assimilation is the adoption of the culture and values of a dominant group of people by ethnicity, religion, or social behaviors. One of the big changes that the Native Americans had to go through was their big shift in their food and diet. Native Americans mainly ate corn, beans, and many whole fruits and vegetables. As the time went by and the Spanish colonists started to come in, they brought in pigs, sheep, lard, and many other fattening foods that they would bring in to to intercede the Native American diet. And even in today's culture, um, even doctors nowadays are even talking about how these types of foods are actually and can be detrimental to the body if eaten many quantities of it. And one of the most unfortunate and the worst oppression that I have to talk about is the oppression of religion. And this is the one that I don't want to talk about. I want to talk about the least. Mainly is because I myself grew up in a religious background and I myself identify as a Christian. And in no way, shape, or form do I actually promote or agree with the practices of what the Spanish have done to the Native Americans. A lot of these Native Americans, they were stripped away from their culture, their religion, and their language. And many of these Native Americans were actually put to work, were actually put through hard labor for the church. Um, and some of these people were actually forced into Catholicism because of this. And in no way, shape, or form do I myself agree with the practices of the Spanish colonists. And of course, one of the most disappointing things that must be talked about is the genocide of the Spanish settlers to the Native Americans. Genocide is was common, back then. Genocide is the act of killing multiple people that either go to a ethnic group or religious groups or any type of group that is labeled a certain way. And a good example of this would be the Taino genocide. This Native American tribe unfortunately went through a genocide that Spaniards came in and wiped out 3 million people from this population alone. This is not just from killing, but also from the diseases that have also came through and have spread towards the entire spread towards the people that were in the camps. And it was actually a statistic that was even put in an article that 85% of this particular group was massacred through this.
Resource exploitation. Colonial endeavors led to the exploitation of a wide range of natural resources, including agricultural products like sugar and tobacco, precious metals like gold and silver, and several other commodities. The encomienda system and later the repartimiento system were examples of coercive labor techniques used in the extraction of natural resources, which resulted in exploitation and suffering of indigenous inhabitants. Mining. Significant mineral wealth, mostly gold and silver, was found and extracted as a result of Spain's colonization of the Americas. The Spanish Empire gained a great deal of money from mining of places like Potosí, Bolivia, and Zacatecas, Mexico. But the hard-working conditions and forced labor that these mines placed on native communities and enslaved people were frequently cruel and merciless. Agriculture. In its colonies, the Spanish Empire built agricultural plantations where they raised cash crops like cotton, sugar, tobacco, and other commodities. Many times, forced labor, including employment of enslaved Africans and indigenous populations, was required for the cultivation of these products, which resulted in severe human misery and exploitation. Cultural exploitation. The colonized populations were forced to adopt Spanish language, religious practices, and cultural standards as part of Spain's colonial operations, which also included the exploitation of indigenous cultures. Many communities lost their cultural legacy as a result of suppression and erasure of indigenous languages, rituals, and traditions brought about by this cultural domination. The colonized populations were forced to adopt Spanish language, religious practices, and cultural standards as part of Spain's colonial operations, which also induced exploitation of indigenous cultures. Many communities lost their cultural legacy as a result of suppression and erasure of indigenous languages, rituals, and traditions brought about by this cultural domination. The encomienda system. The encomienda was a system that originated during the Spanish colonization of the Americas in the 16th century. It was essentially a labor system that allowed Spanish crown to grant land and right to extract tribute and labor from indigenous inhabitants of a particular area to individual Spanish colonists. This system was based on the premise that the indigenous people would be protected and converted to Christianity by the Spanish colonists in exchange for their labor. Repartimiento system. The repartimiento system was a labor system implemented by the Spanish colonial authorities in the Americas during the 16th century. It was introduced as an alternative to the encomienda system, which had resulted in widespread abuse and exploitation of the indigenous population. The repartimiento system aimed to organize and regulate labor more effectively while ostensibly protecting the rights of the indigenous people.